Lightning Lee Murray wanted to be world champion in the UFC.
He just happens to be involved in the largest cash robbery in the world. This is the sort of thing you see in Hollywood films.
Heists, armed gang, huge amounts of money.
The policeman, Shorty, Hoodie, Mr. Average, high-vis, driver and stopwatch.
A fiendishly clever plan, which, up to the moment they drove away, had worked flawlessly.
Catching Lightning, only on Showtime, streaming with Paramount Plus.
We are outside in Austin. It's a privilege.
You know that.
South by Southwest, please welcome to the stage Rachel Nichols from Showtime's Headliners and Ryan Clark from The Pivot.
Woohoo! Hey, y'all.
It wasn't like I was expecting more of an introduction.
I know.
You know, I wanted to be like, and here's Rachel. But we didn't get any of that, but it's okay.
Can you sing for me? Because that would be nice.
So amongst the many talents that I do not have, singing is at the top of that list. That is not what I do.
All right, so we'll skip the musical intro, but I want to give you your intro. I am sitting here with a Super Bowl champion, as y'all know, a Pro Bowler, a Sugar Bowl champion, ESPN analyst, host of the wildly successful podcast, The Pivot, and most importantly, a dad to 3 awesome kids. So,
Yes, I am.
Welcome to Ryan Clark, everyone.
Woo! You know what? I'm going to need you guys to do better. And here's why. We are outside in Austin.
In black. We're all wearing black, which was a mistake on our part, and I'm going to just admit it right now. We should have been wearing like that white linen safari look.
It's a little early for linen, right? What's the seasons?
I live in Southern California. It's not early for anything. You gotta adapt to where you are now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Well, look, there's all sorts of things we want to talk about today. Ryan's gonna ask me some questions. I'm gonna ask you some questions. One of the first things we've been asking guys, though, over at Showtime, and I've gotten some great answers, so I wanted to hear yours, was when you were a kid, what is one of your earliest memories of watching an NFL game, seeing a particular player, and being like, I want to do that?
I would say, so I know you can't tell now because I'm only 5'11", but as a kid, I played quarterback.
You're tall to me. I just want to point that out.
A lot of people are tall to you. But as a kid, I played quarterback, and Randall Cunningham was the quarterback of the Eagles.
As he was.
Kids draw these sort of comparisons or find these commonalities that are different than adults.
Yeah.
Randall Cunningham became my favorite player because we had the same initials.
Yeah.
Right? So I was Ryan Clark, he was Randall Cunningham. So every team I played on, I wanted to wear number 12. And if they didn't have number 12, I was like, okay, give me 11 or give me 13. I made my dad get me this ugly face mask so he could cut it off with an axe or like with a saw so I could have a Randall Cunningham face mask. And it was one Christmas.
Wait, I'm sorry, I need to just backtrack. Your dad owned an axe, and do we need to get into that further?
So
or no?
my dad didn't own an axe. Mr. Robert across the street
all right.
owned an
Fair.
axe. We borrowed his, and that's how I got my face mask. But it was a Christmas at Macy's, if you've ever been to the Superdome, which I'm sure you have.
I have.
Macy's is connected to the Superdome.
Yep.
So my dad told me that he was going to buy me a gift from Macy's for Christmas, which is a big deal.
Sure.
Right? I'd never really been in Macy's like that.
Amazing.
And we walked straight through. He takes me to a game. It's a Monday night game, Philadelphia versus the New Orleans Saints.
You didn't even know you were going to the game.
I didn't even know I was going to the
surprise.
game. And I got
That's
to
incredible.
see Randall Cunningham for Christmas.
See, that's a good dad.
Yeah, it's dope. It was
That
dope.
is pretty great. See, I love that story. It's good. And, look, people see people and they think, okay, I can be like that. And then that's the secret
And
to
I
the
wasn't
whole
like
game.
that because I couldn't throw.
I mean, so you went to the other side. It's fine. I was trying to remember when we first met. I was trying to do the math. I'm going to say, I think it was 17 years ago, which is amazing because we were both like 10 at that point.
Yeah, if it was 17 years ago, I was actually born four years before.
Right, just 4 years before.
Yeah, because I just started being able to drink.
So young. But the world met you at LSU, so I just want to take you back to that because I remember ages ago you telling me about a conversation you had with Nick Saban when he came in the middle of when you were at the program, and it stuck with me because you said it kind of changed who you are.
Well, Nick told me I sucked. That was kind of like the start of it. But when Nick Saban comes in, I'm going into my junior year. I started as a sophomore. I remember the stats. I had 110 tackles. I had 11 pass breakups. I had 3 interceptions. And I'm not bragging. It's not bragging when it's facts.
That is
right?
true.
And so I remember the head trainer comes to me and he's like, we told Coach Saban he has to meet with you. You're the leader of the defense. So I'm like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go up there and he's gonna tell me all of these great things about myself. And he told me all the things I had to work on, all the things I wasn't good at, and how I was too skinny and I had to gain weight and I had to lift and all of these things. And in hearing that conversation, though, it let me know, because I was 20 at the time.
Did he say anything nice?
No, he didn't say anything nice. He didn't say anything nice. But you fast forward that entire year, I ran the defense. I was the leader of the defense. I made every single check. We're at the bowl game, and I was late on a check. And Coach Saban starts cussing me out like he always does. And if anybody ever watches an Alabama game, if you watch the game, for some reason, when Coach Saban starts cussing and he gets mad, he holds his left butt cheek. I don't know if you got to grab it tight
That's
in
an
order
insider
to.
tip for
That's
y'all.
an insider tip. If he's really pissed off, he's going to grab his left butt cheek. Just believe me, I know these things. And so he starts that, and I was like, all right, Coach, I got it. It's bowl practice.
Yeah.
He cusses me out from the time I walk from the line of scrimmage to the end zone. I take all of my pads off. Right, I'm going into my junior year. I take my pads off. Now, anybody who's ever been in an argument with their significant other knows if you're going to storm out of the room, the exit needs to be close.
Yes.
I'm storming out of a room, but our practice facility is away from the locker room.
So you're like 100 yards away.
No, I had to walk a mile.
What?
We caught a bus. So now I took my pads off and I got to storm out for yardage. Like, if I'm storming out, I'm mad. And so, like, all of these coaches come up to me. Everybody's coming up to me. And one of the coaches' name was Carlton Buckles. He goes, Ryan, like, don't leave. You have a chance to play in the league.
Right.
I set up a meeting with Coach Saban and my mom. It's the first time they talk. And he said, he's like, a lot of times when I'm cussing you or screaming at you, it's not about you. It's about the rest of the team. He said, I know you can take it. He was like, but not all the guys can. And so if they hear me getting on one of my best players in that way, he's like, indirectly, they're going to pick up what they're doing too.
Yeah,
and I was
sure.
like, look, Coach, hell, you should have just told me that.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been nice to know.
It would have been good
but
to know.
But this was a tip then for your future marriage, because then you know how to storm out of a room and how not to.
Well,
Although when you're married, I would advise all the gentlemen out there, don't storm out of the room. Just
Exactly.
say, you're right, honey.
that don't work either.
I'm just saying.
You know what?
I've been married more than 20 years. It works for me.
No, that is not true. You know that when you want to argue,
Yeah,
you want to
that's
argue.
true.
So if he gives you the,
He's right.
You're right, baby. Oh, I'm just right now, huh? So now all of a sudden, I'm correct. And he's like,
right.
yes, babe,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. People are always coming up to me and asking me, "How did you start?" But I know we all know we had the chance to watch you start in the NFL, and you went undrafted. And what was that experience like? Because that's someone telling you right to your face, we don't think you're good enough.
Well, the one thing, my son was born on April 22nd, 2001.
Okay.
The draft, the first round, was on April 22nd, 2002. So I was actually boiling hot dog weenies during the draft because the kids like hot dogs. And it was his birthday party, and we were enjoying that. And so then next day, obviously, I don't get drafted. Only 2 teams even called my agent.
Okay.
The New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants.
Right.
So as I'm trying to make the decision, and obviously it works for me that it's the Saints, I'm 15 minutes from there, the Saints pull their offer. So now the Saints, I only have one option. So I go to New York, and I remember my mom hugged me when I was getting on the plane or when she was dropping me off, and she's like, go get a job. And walking in there, I never thought it was possible I wouldn't.
Right.
And I was asked recently, a guy DM'd me who's an undrafted free agent, and he asked, like, what was my mindset in making it?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, every day I went on the field, I stepped on the field knowing I belonged.
Huh.
I said, but I also stepped on the field knowing that no one else knew what I knew.
Right.
And so I had to play with the confidence that I was meant to be there, but I also had to play with the understanding that I had to prove it to everybody else. And so it's part of my story. I think it's the reason I'm a fighter, and I am excited that there are other people like me who can look at me and sometimes forget. Like, so many kids ask me what round I was drafted in.
Right, sure.
Because they see the end.
Dude, you won a Super Bowl. You played in the NFL for 13 years. Most guys, I think the league average is 3. Like, I mean, the success you had to know that you started that way. And by the way, it wasn't easy for you when you walked in the door at the Giants, because I remember this. you injured their second-round draft pick, and I want to read you. I've got it here somewhere because it's
What type of hatchet job?
Nope.
Guys.
This is amazing. Well, y'all got to hear this. Wide receiver Tim Carter was injured in morning practice session when safety Ryan Clark, that's you, drove him out of bounds. Although Clark was trying to cover the speedy Carter, he needlessly over-pursued him during this non-pad drill. Head coach Jim Fassel was very upset with Clark, but more upset about injuring Carter, saying, quote, "You can't show me toughness without the pads. You only show stupidity." I want to know, when you hear that, are you afraid you're going to get cut? And that, to me, is such a strength of character moment for you that you were able to move through that and make the team. He made the team. I literally went back and looked at this and I was like, you made the team after that? That says so much about you.
Well, the first thing is that's not nice what Coach Fassel said.
That's my point. Is that who makes the team after a coach says that about you in training camp as an undrafted rookie?
I mean, I think that's one of those things, though. It was the undrafted rookie in me that made that play happen. I was just hustling. I was trying to show that I was willing to work. And you absolutely think you're going to get cut. We had a scrimmage that year, and we find out later that I have an issue with my blood, which I didn't know necessarily at that point. And I take all these plays in a row, and I almost pass out.
Right.
So they pull me out of the scrimmage, and I call my mom crying. Because I was like, Mom, I'm undrafted. There's no way if I can't make it through a scrimmage. And so you add that to that play and to what Coach was saying. And, yeah, you don't feel like you're going to make it. But someone told me before camp started, don't cut yourself.
That's a great line.
Yeah, don't start counting numbers. Don't start looking at your plays, thinking this is what the coaches see. Just continue to play hard, continue to work. And I eventually made the team.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny, those things along the way. When I started, there was so many people who, I mean, nobody wanted to see a girl in the locker room, frankly. You were in the locker room when I was young and one of the only women around, and frankly, I was in my 20s. There weren't a lot of people who wanted to see that. And the people who show you what it means, I remember Kobe Bryant, during his rookie year. He was a rookie, I was close to a rookie, and frankly, Kobe wasn't very popular among his teammates his rookie year. I don't know how much people remember that now, but he was this kid coming out of high school, and team guys were mostly older on that Lakers team. They used to have beer in the locker room after games, and when Kobe came, they had to get rid of the beer because he was underage. That was not popular, and I just remember sitting on a bench with him trying to do an interview, but then we just started talking, and he just kind of said something similar to what you did about, hey, you can't cut yourself, that idea of you just got to keep going as hard as you can. And when someone tells you to leave, they'll tell you to leave. But until then, you got to go as hard as you can.
Yeah, but for you, trying to kind of break down that barrier and being in the locker room, what was that experience like, knowing that you were the new kid on the block and the unpopular kid when it came to a lot of the players?
Well, it was interesting. My first job out of college was in South Florida. I worked for the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, and I was covering football, and I was covering both, backup reporter on the Miami Dolphins. I was covering the Miami Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes was when it was like the end of the U era, which was interesting because I was 21 years old, and a lot of guys on the team were older than me. Ray Lewis was a senior that year. And it was just utter chaos, as we all has been documented, right? That, there were a bunch of guys who got arrested that year. Unfortunately, a player on that team got murdered, Ray Lewis's roommate. A kid died in the ValueJet plane crash. So it was just sort of chaos all the way around. And the fact that I was younger almost made it easier for some of those guys because they just sort of felt like I was a kid at their college. So that at least gave me the confidence to feel like, okay, I can do this. And then when I stepped into pro locker rooms for the first time, that's when it was really, oh, you're not welcome here. And one of the teams I covered early on, I actually had the general manager of the team say to me, we're not going to give you any quotes. We're not going to talk to you. We don't want you here. We've never had a woman covering this team. And a bunch of the guys on the team would not answer my questions. They would just sort of sit there and then move on to the next question, that sort of thing. And I got lucky with some people along the way who were players in some of those locker rooms. And by the way, you were one of them at one point in my career who were like, great. She asks smart questions. I'm going to talk to her. And I think that in any job, when you do one of these things, part of it is your grit and perseverance. Part of it is luck. We can all not pretend that that's part of the equation. And then part of it is finding the people who will help you thrive and do what you want to do. I mean, you tell me, when I was talking to you and sitting there sticking the microphone in your face, what made you think, okay, this is someone I want to talk to?
Well, I think the first thing is, if you've ever been counted out and believe that you actually do have the talent, you knew somebody had to give you a chance.
Yep.
And that was my thing. And like, if I'm being honest, I didn't see you any differently.
Well, that's
right.
very kind.
I think if anything, when I look at, or at least at that time for sure, when I saw women, I actually, and this is going to be a parallel that people may disagree with, I actually thought to myself, she had to work harder to get here. If they've put her in this position, then this was the position she had to fight for.
Yep.
So if I've fought for things my whole life, like, why wouldn't I find some sort of synergy with that person? And then I think it's like anything else. I don't walk in a room and look at somebody, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whether they're a woman or a man, and judge them based on that. I'm gonna give you a chance to show me who you are. And then now, once you show me that, I get to behave however I want to react to you.
Absolutely.
But I can't walk up to you with this wall already built, because I don't want people doing that to me.
Well, that says a lot about you. So thank you. You and I really started working together when you were with the Steelers. You were with Washington first. And I did want to ask you about that time, because you played with Sean Taylor in the secondary. What do you remember about playing with Sean? What was that like?
That's one of my greatest accomplishments as a player. And it wasn't that I got to play with him, it was that he trusted me to be his friend. Sean had been through a ton. And he wasn't a guy that just automatically befriended you or trusted you. You know, like, there are days I would take naps at my house and wake up and Sean's playing Madden with my son Jordan.
That's,
you know, still to this day, like, that's his Uncle Sean. My daughters feel the same way. And I think it was this feeling of inferiority, right? When you were around him, because you were like, I can't do any of those things, right? I was only 2 years older than him.
Right.
And I was like, you would watch him do stuff and you'd be like, well, that's not human. Like, coach can't ask me. And then on the other side of it was, he had so much confidence in me.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I told him a story about Tiki Barber in camp, and something Tiki did to me. And we're playing in the second game of the season. I make a big tackle on Tiki, and Sean comes screaming across the field, still upset about the story I told him during the week.
well, now you got to tell all of us.
So what happened was, Tiki, and Tiki knows this, it was my second year.
Yes.
I had worked my way into being the third safety.
Right.
So I was playing in goal line. Tiki kind of squeezes out of a tackle. I come through.
Right.
I make a big play on him. Everybody's excited for me because I'm like everybody's little brother at the time. And Tiki gets up and he looks at me and says, if I wouldn't have tripped, you couldn't have tackled me. Right?
Come
And so, and it's okay. Like, he's a turd. He knows it. I'm not tripping on that. And so, but those things you don't forget.
No, you do not.
Right? Because at the time, he was a very good player. I was a younger player. You know, you look up to dudes like that.
Yeah.
But what it did for me was, when you go to Washington the next year and you're starting for the other team.
The NFC East, one of those games.
Right? Yeah, it's okay. Well, let's get it then. Now, there's no excuses. You
Yep.
know? And so that was one of those things. And I remember when Tom Coughlin cut me, when he got there, and he sat me down, one of those Nick Saban conversations. Tom Coughlin told me, there's other leagues, right?
Really?
There's other leagues, and that you should really focus on special teams, because there's no way that you can hold up as a starting safety in this league.
Oh, man.
But you know what? The world's full of stupid people. And I think your opinion, right? Your opinion or your evaluation or your criticism does not make you stupid. The way you deliver it does.
Yes.
I can feel a certain way about a person and relay that to them in a way that is constructive, right? That is not destructive.
Right.
And I don't think that coaches feel in many ways that they have to do that, and they don't. But you get the right guy every now and then that picks it apart in a way that allows it to help him going forward.
Yeah, you played for one of those. I mean, I'm a huge Mike Tomlin fan with the way he relates to players. You played for a guy who knows, I mean, he's tough. Mike Tomlin is tough. No one said that Mike Tomlin is babying his players, but from the outside at least, it appears that he knew how to talk to you guys.
Well, he understood us. Like, you got to realize too, he was closer to our age at that time. But the other part was he was very honest. He walked in the door, Rach, and he said, "I'll treat everybody fair. I will not treat everybody the same."
Right.
And that spoke volumes to me.
That's a
He
great
said,
sentence.
he's like, like not everybody is going to get the same sort of leeway. Not everyone is going to get the same sort of opportunity to have conversation. Some people are going to be coached or told what to do. And I think once you understood that about him and you knew whatever he was saying was going to be said to you in a direct manner, but also in a manner that was respectful, I could deal with anybody. And the other thing is he's consistent. Right? If you come in to work every day and you treat me the same way, I can deal with you. It's the people that do this that are difficult to deal with. One day you smiling in my face, the next day you're talking behind my back. Like, that's not the people I fool with. But it does make me think about you in this way. You've been through being at ESPN, leaving and coming back and building yourself up. And you've always seemed to be able to reinvent yourself and find a place for you in every space. What is it about you that has built up that sort of resiliency that allows you to thrive in any situation?
I think it's a lot like you, is that when you hear a lot early on, you can't do this, you start to kind of think about anything. Well, I could do that. And it doesn't have to be limited to whatever your current field of play is, right? It's like, oh, well, I could do that too. Why can't I do that? Everyone told me I couldn't do this. So if you're telling me I can't do that, I can give that a try also. So I think it's part of that. I think that sometimes you underestimate when you're younger how character building and how much of a life skill it is to be told early on that you can't do something. But I also think that curiosity is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, and that if you are interested in things that you haven't done before, you will have a much more interesting life. And that is something that with each of those stops I have tried to do, is be curious about, well, what would it be like if we did this? Or, this sounds interesting, let's get into it. And I think that it can be easy to get stuck in what you know. And that if you can move past that and be curious about the world and other things around you, things that might seem smaller at the beginning can turn out to be very big and very exciting once you get into it. So I like that a lot. For sure. I do want to ask you about Pittsburgh and to follow up on the Sean Taylor thing, because you and I have never talked about it. So I thought in front of a bunch of strangers would be the best time
it's always good to
bring
bare
up
your soul.
something emotional.
I don't know any of these people though, so it's good.
It's okay. No, in all seriousness, and it's because I covered Sean also, and I just loved him. I mean, he was a great guy, and from Miami and DC and everything. What was it like when you were in Pittsburgh and you woke up that day and found out that he had passed?
So I had just gotten out of the hospital the
That's
day
right.
before Sean
I knew it was the same year. I didn't know it was that day.
Yeah, so the day before Sean was shot. And so I had these tubes. I had to get these tubes of drainage after they took my organs or whatever. And so I get a call. It was either, I think it might have been Antonio Pierce at the time. So I get a call from him to turn my TV on.
Okay.
And so we turn the TV on, and so we find out. So we're talking to Jackie, who was his fiance at the time, and we're just trying to figure out what's going on. You kind of hear that it's not going well. So I go to sleep. I get a phone call that wakes me up, and it's Rashad Bowman, who was there with us in Washington 2 years before, and he just says he died. So obviously I hang the phone up, I'm crying, I cut the TV on, and my kids had to go to school. And so I'm sitting on maybe not. So I'm sitting on the stairs, and my son comes up to me, and he just says, he's like, "Dad, like, what happened to Uncle Sean?" And so, at that point, you're explaining to a 6 or 7 year old.
I can't imagine.
Right? Why or what happened to this person that at least to him was a superhuman.
Of course.
And
all of us.
And so it was dealing, because at the time I was dealing with my blessings. Right? A doctor that said if I didn't call him on Friday, I wouldn't have made it through the weekend.
Right.
We don't know if we can get enough of the spleen out, so we have to have these two. So I'm going through all of these things, and I'm so grateful to be alive, and then, you know, one of your best friends passes, and you're questioning, like, why you were saved, right? Why God showed you grace? Why did God take him from his family and from the people that loved him? And so I just went in the next day. I got my tubes pulled so I could fly. And like I just remember getting to Pedro's house and just seeing all the pictures of him and seeing everybody together. And I just stood against the wall and just cried. And it's because like they were all so strong and I was so scared. Right? Because I just felt like I didn't deserve to still be here if he wasn't. And then the rest of my career, so I tried to change my number.
Right, I remember.
And they wouldn't let me change my number. And so the rest of my career, I wore his number to practice. I had a shirt made that I wore underneath my jersey every single game that had, you know, his birthday, the day he passed, his initials, his name on the back, his number on the back, because I felt like the world deserved, or the world needed him out there more than it needed me. And I had an opportunity to bring him out there until whenever. And so I never stepped on the field the rest of my career without 21 somewhere, whether I was wearing it, whether it was tattooed on my body, and so it was I got to go to the unveiling this year and be with his daughter and be with Jackie and be with his family. And it's like, it's just as emotional today as it was then.
I don't like what they put up for him. Is that okay to say?
I said it.
I think they should have done something nicer. Is
I
that
said
okay?
it. We said it on our show. We got to talk about it on the pivot.
I'm sorry, the Commanders did what was I guess, monument to him,
I don't know
or
what it's called.
display to him, or
Installation.
Installation
is what they called it.
I would like it to have been
it should have
bigger
been a
and
statue.
nicer. Thank you.
It should have been a statue. And if you were just going to take clothing, just put clothing in the box and let it be. I thought it's one of those situations where if baby Jackie, who's his daughter, is okay, why can't I be?
Yes.
And
that is charitable.
And I was.
And you are nicer than me.
Right. And I was with her and I was with them. And so it was still all the emotion. And then once the emotion was gone, it was like excuse my language, but like, what the F is this?
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of just goes along with who they are though. Right? Like I'd rather you do nothing than be disrespectful. And that's what they were.
That man cannot sell that team fast enough for me. He can't. I'm sorry. I grew up in the DC area, and I grew up when they were winning Super Bowls and Doug Williams and John Riggins and just the Joe Theismann, like all of the tradition of that team. And by the way, Jack Kent Cooke, who was the owner when I was growing up, was a little bit crazy, so it's not like we ever had a ton of sanity in that city. But it felt like a communal team. It felt like they real care for the players and real understanding of what the team meant for the community. And for me, as a local and someone who grew up loving that football team and is the reason that I'm in sports and would sit in front of the TV as an 8-year-old just with wide eyes, it bums me out, man. It really is frustrating, and I had to stop being a fan of the team. And we were talking before we came on here. My kids are not fans of that team, and I could not pass that down because.
But is it about the dysfunction of the football or the dysfunction of the humans in the organization?
I mean, it's all of it. I don't think any of it's unrelated, right? I don't think the team has been well run over these past years, and part of that is that I don't think the respect that's been given to the players and sort of what they can do and who they are, and I think that comes across in personnel decisions, which then comes across on the football field. And then obviously, I mean, it's been uncovered. I've heard, working in the industry, I've heard whispers and sort of bits and pieces about what's been going on in the front office for years, but we've now seen with investigations and congressional investigations and all of that stuff, the level of dehumanizing conduct. And it's not just, it goes way beyond disrespect to women, but the persecution of women in some cases in that office. And it connects with the dehumanization I've seen towards some of the players. And it makes me angry. And I will be excited when they have new ownership there.
No, honestly, the better organizations understand that. You think about teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers that are run by great families,
Yes.
right? The Rooney family is a great family. The Rooney family, you'd see Art or Big Dan, and he'd ask you, how are your kids? And he'd call your kids by name and all those things. So
he would walk through your locker room,
All the
and
time.
you had a guy in his, I want to say I'm going to get this wrong, 80s, almost 90s?
Yeah.
Who would know your children's names.
And so I saw the difference in that, but I don't need that to have a great football team.
Yeah.
But when you have a rotten building, right? When you have a building, if I have any sort of compassion, any sort of heart, if I understand loving my brothers and sisters, if I see you being mistreated, I can't be my best self, right? Because I have to, whether it's say something or I have to feel it, the energy is bad. And when the energy is bad in any spot, people can't be their best. And I think no matter what you do when you're there, because I've been there on 2 different stints, you can just feel it. It's like a stink that hangs around, like the stink that hung around Pigpen on Charlie Brown, right? It's like when you're walking around, it feels like every freaking thing is cursed. And I do believe it starts at the ownership, but also what happens as all of that trickles down to every level.
Yeah, well, I'll be very interested to see how that goes. One of the recent news stories I saw was that Dan Snyder refuses to sell to Jeff Bezos because he doesn't like the articles the Washington Post has written about. I can't even. So we'll find out. You brought it up, so I wasn't gonna. I know you've talked about your sickle cell at length before, but I do think I think anytime people can hear a little bit about something that needs more attention and more light. You said that you had tubes sticking out of you. In 2007, you played a game at altitude in Denver. And can you just take us through what happened?
Yeah, so I played the entire game. And before I left, I made the joke, another Washington story. I had played in Denver before. I came back. I felt something under my left rib, pain for a week. I went into Washington every single week and I said, hey, something is wrong with me. It took them till Friday to send me to the doctor. They send me to the doctor and they diagnosed it as a spleen contusion. So basically, I just thought I got hit or bruised, right? So going there the next year, I'm walking out of the house and I go, ha, 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 I hope I don't hurt my spleen.
Oh, boy.
Because, well,
Denver.
I'm a glutton for punishment, right? And so I go there, we play, we're getting on the plane. I feel the same pain. I tell the trainer, though, I say, hey, man, I think my spleen's hurting.
Right.
And trainers look at you funny like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
What you know about your spleen? I was like, nah, it's happened before. I felt it. Doctor comes up, he does some kind of tappy thing, which I always think is some BS.
I mean,
how the hell are you gonna tap on my shirt and figure out something wrong with my spleen?
And yet?
You are not a personal MRI, bro. But anyway.
And yet, they pulled you off the plane.
He was right.
They pulled you off the airplane.
He was right. So they pulled me off the plane. There's nothing really they can do for you. So they kind of give me some pain pills, send me to the hotel. It's the worst pain I've ever been in my life. And so, because I'm a doctor here.
Of course.
I'm a
of course
doctor
we all
here.
are, right?
So
we
what
all
I said was, I was like, if I can numb myself, I cannot. So I took a cold shower. I put the air conditioner down as low as it can go. And I laid on the floor, butt booty naked. Because I figured if I laid there, I'd get numb. And it was stupid.
The guy in the third row needed to hear that.
Yeah, some people need to know this. So I call my wife and she's like, no, I'm calling the doctor. They take me back to the hospital. My family comes out the next day. They bring me back home. I was sick for a month and a half.
Yeah.
So a month and a half, I'll go from 205 pounds to, no, it wasn't a month, it was a month. I go from 205 pounds to 165 pounds.
Like, when was the last time you had been 165 pounds?
High school.
Right.
Yep, high school. And so every night I would go to sleep. At about 2 a.m., I'd wake up. My fever would get, like the highest it got at home was probably like 104.
Oh my
but
God.
every night it'd be like 102 to 104. I'd change my clothes, I'd change the sheets, I'd go to sleep, but they'd make me go to work. And so I'd go into work. They send me home every day by like 10 o'clock, so I'm not sure why I went in. And one day, doctor's reading the test to me, Rachel.
Right.
And he hands them to me because he told me everything was all right. And he goes, now I'll listen to you complain. And I'm telling him, I was like, bro, something's wrong with me.
Right.
So I just prayed for wisdom. I called a doctor on a Friday. I was like, Doc, I need a test. He worked at the Cancer Institute. His name's Dr. Marks. And he's like, I can hear it in his voice.
This was an outside opinion.
Yep.
Okay.
But he had seen me before. But I can hear it in his voice. He was tired of me. And he was just like, just go ahead, man. I'm in New York.
Right.
Go ahead. I take the test. He calls an hour later. He asks where we are, asking somebody with my kids, and he says, don't pack a bag, turn around, get to the hospital.
Are you serious?
Yep. Turned out my spleen was now infected, and it was 4 times the size of a normal spleen, which is why I couldn't eat. So that's why I lost the weight. And I had a weird infectious disease doctor who would come smell my bulbs, and she thought she was foreign, and she was like, I love it, infection. It was weird, but she made me feel better about it because I was like, and she was cute too. So I was
This
like,
panel has taken such a turn. Y'all
Yeah.
thought you were coming to talk about football.
yeah, so I was like, if this cute little infectious disease doctor thinks my infection is cool, then
I'm cool.
we're gonna ride it out.
Exactly.
And so once they never found out what the infection was, they did this thing though. Hold on. So
All right.
imagine this being longer and skinnier. My spleen was too big and they didn't want to cut me open because they
Okay.
said I wouldn't be able to play ever
Sure.
again. So they do this thing where they'd vacuum parts of it out. So they just put me to sleep and then they'd vacuum my
Damn.
spleen out, part of it. So the first time they do it, everything's fine. I go back to the room, don't feel anything. The next time, I wake up in the middle.
No.
So when I wake up in the middle, I look at the doctor and I said, and he was like, are you okay? And my only question was, should I be?
Oh.
Because my thought was this, if, and this is no offense,
Yeah.
Rachel, I think you are a very tough lady, and I know that you have babies,
I
and
do.
I cannot have no babies. But my thought is, when he said I should be okay, I was like, that means like if Rachel was here and she woke up during this procedure, she could do it. And in my mind, I'm like, dog, you're a professional football player. And so I let him finish, just like
Are we
another.
really going to go toe-to-toe? Because I had a C-section delivering twins, and for all y'all who
No,
don't
Rachel,
know,
I'm not saying.
they take your intestines out when you have a C-section because they got to get to the babies, and they put them on the table, and you were awake during the whole thing. So take that, Ryan Clark.
So it's now
Thank
let's
you. See? The
now
women
let's
know.
one up each other in pain.
The women know. All right,
I
continue.
just said you had babies, Rach.
Continue.
No. But so I wake up in the middle, and then when I go back to the room, my wife could see it on my face. And she asked me what happened. I told her. And then so I asked another doctor, should I have been able to do it? He was like, hell no. He was like, nobody does that. But I was my fever spiked again to like 104.5. I was in the bathroom one morning crying. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm tired of fighting. And my doctor looked just like Tom Brady, which at the time was a bad omen to
gonna
me.
say,
Because I was
you
like,
did
why
not
would
like the
Tom?
Patriots.
Yeah, why would Tom Brady save a Steeler? And he walks in, he sees me on the ground, like I was crying. I was like, Doc, I'm done. And they couldn't figure out the infection. He was like, fuck it, I'm taking it. That's his exact words.
Really?
Yeah, and so he picks me up off the ground. I have the surgery. About a week later, I get sick again. They take my gallbladder out. And I asked him that day, I was like, can I play again? And he was like, I don't know. He said, if you can be strong enough again, then you can. And the rest, you won the Super Bowl next year.
I mean, it's funny. As I said, it's always good to raise awareness. I think there's so many stories of people who think there's something wrong with them. And unfortunately, look, I mean, first of all, no doctor is perfect. And also, the way the medical establishment is now, there's a real premium on get them in, get them out, bill to the insurance, do all this stuff. And to fight for yourself the way you did, I mean, what would you say to people out there who might be in that position?
I think nobody knows you better than you do. And on top of that, no one cares about you more than you do.
Yep.
And so many times we work to be obedient. We work to follow protocol. And what I've learned from losing people or watching people battle through certain things is like everybody else's life goes on if you lose yours.
Right.
It's going to be a very select few of people who suffer from that. And what I can tell everybody is this. When you think you're dying, which I did, I was really sick one day and I was shivering. My mom prays a ton. She's laying on top of me with like covers. My wife is like trying to cool me, like find a way for me to like just stop shivering. And I started to pray. And I prayed for my kids. I prayed for my girls that they find husbands and that they be protected. I prayed that my son would be a better man than me. I prayed that my wife would find somebody to love her and to help her take care of my babies. And the only other prayer part of that, I was like, just don't let him be more handsome than I am. Like I could live with him being a better man. I asked God to forgive me for my sins.
Yep.
And I said, anything I've ever done that has not pleased you, I said, I am sorry. And then I said, and I'm ready. And at that moment, I stopped shivering.
Really?
But what it made me realize was at the time, I had millions of dollars, I had cars, I had houses, I had all of these things. I didn't think of any of that. I thought about my children, I thought about my wife, and I thought about my salvation. And there are times in life since then, I've forgotten to prioritize all of those things before anything else. And I have to remember that prayer, because when I thought it was over, those were the only things I cared about. So why, if a job doesn't happen the way it's supposed to happen, if I don't get a certain thing I feel like I've earned or deserved, or if you're battling through some adversity, why would I ever let anything outside of those people, anything outside of those cares get me down? Mm-hmm. Why would I give them that control over my life? And that was the thing I learned from that whole experience, but for sure that one in particular.
I think that's such a fascinating idea that, like, why would you give someone else control over your life? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, too, of, other people's opinions of you. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles in society right now, right? With especially social media, and everybody can comment on every aspect of your life, and you don't have to be Ryan Clark, famous football player, TV analyst. You're on social media, just anybody can comment on your Instagram post or anything else. And it's a different environment we're raising our kids in, right?
Well, I think it's because we love the praise, right? And we talked to Dion about this as well. If I ride the high of the applause, I'm also going to ride the lows of the boos, right? You're going to ride the lows of the negativity. And in truth, Rachel, you know it. Like, we know when we're right, we know when we're wrong, we know when we're good, we know when we're bad. Like, if you go out and you don't have the greatest day doing your job, you know it before anyone else.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you go out and you kill it, you know that before anybody else.
Yes.
I always told my kids this. My kids are grown. I have a 24-year-old, a 22-year-old soon. I have an 18-year-old. And I always tell them, if somebody tells you something about yourself outside of this house that I haven't told you, it means two things.
Okay.
It means, one, they're a freaking liar. That's number one. Or it means, two, you are behaving in a way I haven't taught you to. It means that there is some foundational tool I tried to teach you in my house,
right,
and a way that you behave in front of me that you are no longer doing.
Right.
You got to figure out which two.
Right, because either they're right and you're not behaving as you should or as we taught you, or they're wrong and then ignore them.
For you, Rach, someone who has been through the things that you've been through recently, and obviously having to hear, and I'm going to say this from my point of view, having to hear things about yourself that I don't agree with are the characteristics that make you Rachel.
I did not have the fact that I won a Super Bowl to fall back on, so you always have that.
That always helps.
That does help.
That always helps. People forget, though, so that's why I remind Channing and Fred on pretty much every show.
That you had a Super Bowl.
And
they didn't.
They didn't.
Right.
They never even went to one.
Exactly.
Imagine that. Imagine being...
Can you guys imagine never playing in a Super Bowl?
Can you imagine that, guys?
We can't fathom it.
That's
but
because
apparently that's what Fred and Channing have to deal with.
Every time. Think about that. They were in the league all that time and never got to a chip. I mean, I went to 2 in 3 years. It's like easy. You know what I mean?
You didn't just go to 2 and 3 years. You played in one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. And I looked this up. NFL Network ranked the Super Bowl that the Steelers won, and it was the 2008 season, but they played it in 2009. But I hate it when they do that. They're like, it's the 2009 Super Bowl. I'm like, it's not. It's from the 2008 season. But they ranked it the 4th best football game of all time, number 1 best Super Bowl of all time. And
you don't say.
I don't say. I do say.
You know what's crazy? I wish it wasn't.
Well, that's what's funny. So here it was. And by the way, I covered your team all that season. I was at that Super Bowl.
We were so good.
Your defense was so good. I looked up the stats. You led the league, fewest points allowed, fewest yards allowed, ranked 2nd in the league in sacks. You only allowed 51 sacks. And by the way, I also want to say, y'all always had so much fun. That was the most fun locker room. I covered a lot of teams. That locker room was crazy. Y'all had a lot going on.
We had a lot of good people, though.
Great people.
Good people. Good
Great people.
Yes, ma'am.
Like it was one of the most fun, entertaining places to be around. You get to the Super Bowl, start of the fourth quarter, and let's see, you guys were up 20-7 at the start of the fourth quarter.
Man, life was good, man. Life was good.
You know, a good defense would have kept the score that way. No, see, he can't hit me in front of all these people. What made it one of the best games of all time?
I think I'm going to go play pickleball.
No. No. Tell me a little bit about what happened, because Arizona ripped off 16 straight points. You're losing 24-20 with just about 2 minutes on the clock. First of all, I just want to know what it felt like for you on the field. You're walking off. They score they score to bring the score up to 24-20, and you as the defense are walking off the field. What do you feel?
Well, Arian Foster had sent us the script, right? So we already knew.
Yep.
Because, he said football scripted anyway. No, I legitimately, there's a shot of me during the Super Bowl. I'm on the sideline. I have both hands on my head. Like, my eyes are tearing up because we took so much pride in defense.
Yes.
And we used to say,
it's the heart of the team.
Yeah, we used to say, if we score, we should win, because if the other team can't, we can't lose. And to be up 20-7, and remember, that's when Fitz was going crazy in the playoffs.
Yep.
And he has this explosion in the fourth quarter, and there's nothing we could do about it. Like, there's a play, he catches the ball in the middle of the field, he outruns me and Troy, and all I'm thinking is, as I'm looking at Troy, when Larry crosses, is Troy should have stopped making me go get Jamaican food all week. Every night, we eating oxtails and jerk chicken and plantains. I'm like, Troy, it's actually your fault we can't catch Larry. I walked into the week, I was 200, I'm 208 now. But nah, it was just,
Apparently
Kurt,
you just needed a good spleen episode. You would have been fine.
Would have been nice and slim.
Exactly.
It's just one of those things. Like, they stepped up. Kurt Warner's a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer for a
Larry
reason.
Fitzgerald's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And they made plays. And then, honestly, Coach Tomlin, after Santonio Holmes makes what's, to me, the biggest catch in any Super Bowl, he has to come over and give us a pep talk.
Really?
Because we're basically zombies.
Really?
We had just, as a team, we hadn't been through that.
Right.
That season. And we were always the reason we won. And now we felt like we're going to be the reason we lose it. And Coach Tomlin is telling us, if you win, you're still a legendary defense. And listen,
Was that the voice?
I know that tone. Right? That's what I'm trying to make my kids feel better when they F it up. And so I know what he was basically telling us is, y'all effed it up.
Right.
But, man, I remember LaMarr Woodley blitzes. He knocks the football out of Kurt Warner's hands, and me and Troy's Hail Mary. It's going to be Larry Fitzgerald.
Yep.
Troy runs up to me and hugs me and goes, I was so scared. Because both of us had already envisioned the Hail Mary going up, Larry Fitzgerald jumping over our heads, catching it, and us forever being immortalized as the two fat dudes that ate Jamaican food all week, and Larry Fitzgerald mossed them to win the Super Bowl. But God, but God, as my mother often says, sent us LaMarr Woodley. And therefore, it never had to happen. And that's why I'm here talking today, because had we lost, ESPN probably wouldn't have gave me a job.
I don't know about that.
I'd be a coach or something like that.
I don't know about that.
Or
But
I'd
it was
be playing
thrilling.
Pickleball with this guy that now has his pants rolled up like capri pants and his polo shirt open. Because apparently pickleball clothing, there is no jersey.
There is no jersey for pickleball. It's true. By the way, I was on the field at the end of that game because that's what we did as sports reporters. I was working for SportsCenter and NFL Countdown at that time, and we'd come on right for the final 10 minutes. We'd be sitting kind of on the field, ready to come on and interview you guys right on the field. And I just remember that moment. It was so heavy, and just it feeling so heavy. And I remember the same thing, frankly, from the Super Bowl 2 years later, which was kind of a reverse script. You guys were down, I have it written down, but it's like 21-3.
We're down 21-7, maybe 21-3, something like that.
And then you come all the way back.
Yep.
And you guys did not end up winning that one against the Packers, but it made me think when I was going over that, the pressure. I just remember feeling that pressure, and I was just standing there with a stupid microphone in my hand. What is that like? Because literally, there's no more people on earth that watch anything than are watching a Super Bowl. And I think we say that all the time, and the top however many 10 programs of all time watched our Super Bowls, and it has this global audience. But when you actually sit and think about it, every single human on earth, if they were going to have their attention focused on something, it could be anything. And the thing that they are most focused on is you playing these Super Bowls. What is it like in the moment?
It's a privilege.
Does it feel like a privilege, or does
Absolutely.
it feel hard?
Absolutely. I've cried before 2 professional football games in my life.
Okay.
And both of them were Super Bowls.
Okay.
The national anthem is different. The week leading up to the game is different. My dad played football in college. My parents loved football. My family loved football. From the time I touched one, I was in love with it. The only other time I can remember that is having children. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. Like that, my children have never, at that point, they had not done anything for me, even loved me back, and I loved them so much.
Sure.
Right under that was football. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I would have done it, and I know people hear this, I would have done it for free.
Right.
Right? And so now, this ball that you've had with you your entire life, that you threw up in your room when you were going to sleep, that put you through college, like, you're now one of the 106 players in the world that are playing that night.
Right.
Right? Nobody else is. And
with billions of people watching.
Yeah, but for a night, even if you're the last man on that bench, you're better than everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and there is no, like, I'll do this job for as long as they'll let me, and I'll never know truly how good I am at it. I can think I'm good. Mm-hmm. People can tell me I'm good at it.
He's very good.
Oh, thank you very much. People can tell me I'm good at it, but we can't quantify it in any way.
Right.
You just can't.
Yeah.
Like, the reason they invented scoreboards is so you can know how good you are.
Yeah.
Like, that is a privilege.
Sure.
There are so many weeks now, Rachel, that I wish somebody would just put a scoreboard on me, right? That I could wake up and have somebody say, okay, today, RC, you're going to do this show, you're going to do that show, you got to do this for the family, you got to do this for your wife, you got to do this for your kids. And I wish they would freaking score me.
Right, at the end of the day, we'll tell you how you did.
At the end of the day, when it's time to take my shower, I could be like, man, I bust today's tail.
Yep.
Right? But then you just go to sleep. Like, you do that junk, you just go to sleep, and then you wake up. And depending on how your wife feels, you don't even know how you did.
It's true.
And so I remember Charles Woodson was my favorite college player of all time. I had his picture on my wall. And we played it, and obviously he was on the other side. He got hurt. After the game ended, they took a knee. I ran to Charles Woodson to shake his hand. Because it was just like, I was happy for him. My best friend was the defensive backs coach of Green Bay. His name's Joe Witt. He's now in Dallas.
Yeah.
We went to dinner with our entire families who were in town that Friday night together. And so before the game, I hugged him. And it was just, I'm walking off. Coach Tomlin's watching me walk through the confetti. We're the last 2 off the field. He puts his arm around me and he goes, it's time to go. And I remember getting back to the hotel. My daughter was sleeping because she went to sleep before the game was over. She didn't go. She woke up, found out we lost, started crying, and went back to sleep. And I just remember everybody being so sad. James Harrison walking up to me and going, and this was his exact words. He goes, fuck it, let's party.
Amen.
And so that's what we did. Like, we gave every single thing we had to get there, both times. And we had 0 left. And what's sad is this. I did not celebrate when we won. I didn't have a drink.
What?
I was asked afterwards about it. And they said, what are you feeling? And I said, I feel relieved. And I was relieved
that pressure.
That we didn't lose it.
Right.
When we lost it, I was like, they were better.
Right.
And that was okay to me because I knew that, like, from the time I got sick, I said, and this is like taking it back a little bit, we lost to Jay Cutler the night I got sick.
Okay.
Jay freaking Cutler.
I mean,
right? Think about that.
Reality star Jay Cutler.
And when I was in the hospital, I kept thinking to myself, what the frick was the last play of the Denver game
that you may ever play?
Because I thought to myself, if I don't make it, they're going to show this on TV And the last play is I lost to Jay freaking Cutler. Could you imagine that being your legacy? And what I said to myself before that season was this. I said, I truly, because like before that, I knew any play could be my last.
Yeah.
I truly knew. I said, no matter what it is, if they have to cut the film on, if I die or if I never play again, if they got to cut the film on and say, this was Ryan Clark's last play, I want it to look like the exact representation of who I am and what this game means to me. So I didn't need a Super Bowl ring to
Right.
validate that.
Right.
And so the game was the game, and it was just a blessing to be in it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. You bring up transition to media. You wish you had a scoreboard. I'm here to tell you you're very good at your job.
Thank you very
Can
much.
we get a round of applause? Ryan Clark is very good at his job.
Thank
and
you.
I've been getting the 10-minute sign, but I do want to ask you before we get off the stage and go
10 minutes.
toward your pivot co-hosts who get to come up here, even though they never played in a Super Bowl.
Why would we even listen
Why
to
would
them?
we even
I
let them
tell
on the
them that all the
stage?
time, Rachel.
Exactly. But I do want to ask you because, I mean, you probably...
Hey, no, yeah. Rachel said it.
Oh, look at. So I can't imagine you remember this, but we were talking when you were starting to do your internship at ESPN, and we talked for a while about why you wanted to do it. And I was telling, this is my expert advice to Ryan: just be yourself. Yeah, that's good.
It's great advice.
Yeah,
Great
exactly.
advice.
But no, I always knew, frankly, that you would be great at it, and told you that because, first of all, you were great on the other side of the camera when we were interviewing you. And be yourself is actually the key to being on television, right? And it's something I had to learn early. I didn't look like other people looked on TV, even not just being a woman in sports, but I don't want to surprise anyone here. I'm not 6 foot tall. I'm not blonde. And at the time I broke in, I know.
You
Shut
lie.
up. At the time I broke in, you had to look a lot more like a model than I looked. And it just, it was not that sort of glossy TV presence. That's not I came from newspapers. It's just not my bag. And I was starting to try to be on TV, kind of being I am going to talk in a very polished voice. And I sounded ridiculous. And Stuart Scott was the one who pulled me aside and said, you try to be someone else, you're going to, frankly, be like 60% of someone else, and you can at least be 100% of you, and then you can deliver. And that's something I think you've done so well on television, is you are 100% of Ryan Clark, you are yourself. What was that transition like for you?
You know what's funny is that was part of the difficulty in the transition for me, was that I knew I wasn't going to be a Hall of Famer. I wasn't a white quarterback, and I understood that I had to earn certain respect. And so I wanted to be the smartest person on TV.
Right.
And so I would study, I would watch film, I would study statistics. I wanted them to know that I put the work in. And it was actually Josina Anderson who worked with me a little bit in Washington as well. And she's walking past me in the hall and she goes, I wish everybody knew how funny you were.
Huh.
And it was very simple.
Right.
And I didn't understand it. She's like, and so like I saw her a little bit later. I said, what you mean? I was like, I am funny.
Right.
I was like, I'm funny on TV.
I'm fantastic, damn it.
Excellent. And she was just like, she's like, you worried so much about being smart. She's like, which is important.
Right.
She's like, you've now lost all your personality, which is what made you great.
Right.
And that was the day I just figured, I'm going to lose being me. And I say this all the time. I say something very similar to what you said, but I say it like this. I can't out Louis Riddick.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
Yep.
I'm not going to be that. I can't out Matt Hasselbeck.
Sure.
I was like, but they can't be me or outdo me as me either.
Yeah.
And so like that's what I focused on. And the other thing is this. I've learned it's so much easier to remember the truth than it is a lie.
It's true.
And it could be just your truth.
Yeah.
Right? It could be your opinion. And it could just be what you believe. And everybody doesn't have to believe it. You just have to. And here's the other thing. And I'm trying to get my wife to understand this in arguments. I actually don't have to be right. I just need a good reason to be wrong.
Okay.
And that's all I need. My wife don't believe that. Like, yes, no, babe, I'm saying I'm wrong.
Happen in the front row. You know that.
Yeah, but my reasoning for being wrong is extremely strong.
Exactly.
But on TV, though, like, that is true. That if I have a belief that is rooted in film, or belief that's rooted in study, or belief that's rooted in experience, everybody doesn't have to agree with me because it's built on my perception.
All right, now we're about to give the stage over to your pivot friends over there.
Hey, Channing, bring your no championship having tail on.
And I wanted to know, as they come up to the stage, is Fred here too?
Fred, are you talking to people?
Yeah, there we go.
We get a break?
There we go.
Oh, never mind.
As they come up here.
We get a break.
Oh, you're going to break first?
They get a break.
Well, I want to ask you to set up this next panel. Sort of, first of all, I heard you didn't even tell anyone at ESPN you were going to start this side business.
Who told you?
I just heard rumors. And why did you start it, and how did it start? Set this up so people will stick around for the next one.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called The Pivot. In 1 year, we've done over 80 million views, over 650,000 subscribers. We've interviewed Shaq, Kevin Hart, Mike T, and we just had just a great time letting people be vulnerable. But the reason I didn't tell people it started is because I didn't know if I was supposed to do it.
Okay.
And I knew it could be great. I actually started my own podcast just to get reps interviewing.
Right.
And the reason being is, Rachel, straight up, like, I'm better than just being an NFL analyst.
Absolutely.
I'm better than just talking about the things that people want me to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have a passion for what I get to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to communicate why a certain coach needs a job, if I want to communicate why women should be protected in a certain way, I want to get to say that without somebody giving me permission to say it, or without someone stopping me from saying it. And
you've just hit on why I didn't want to be a sideline reporter anymore. Someone has to give you permission to speak.
Yeah, and so that was the reason we started it. It's been great to develop a friendship with Fred and Channing, and it's also been really amazing to give athletes and entertainers a place to come to and not have to debate why they feel the way they feel. To get an opportunity to be uninterrupted in their thoughts and also not judged.
Yeah.
I think so many times when we give our opinion because we're paid to, we're judged by that opinion.
Of course.
Who the hell gives people the right to judge us?
Yeah.
And since I feel that way, when we sit down with people, we're not judging you either. We're having a conversation.
Well, it gets back to anyone else's opinion but yours. Doesn't really
Don't matter.
If you've learned one thing today, that's what you will learn. Everybody, please give Ryan Clark a lot of applause.
Appreciate it.
Stick around because he and
See,
Fred
my
and
man-
Channing will be back.
My man has been in an argument, and he's going to use my line.
And he knows he's going to use your line exactly like that. All right,
Thank you guys
y'all.
so much.
Appreciate it.
Another round of applause for Rachel Nichols and Ryan Clark.
There we go. That was better than the intro, bro.
Once upon a time, there was a place called the wilderness.
We did things out there that we're ashamed of.
There was some darkness.
Your friendships are a little more complicated than most.
Yellow Jackets, only on Showtime, streaming with Paramount Plus.